nice, measured history. There's not a lot of histrionics to it, which I like as a data person, as a scientist. So I really respect the work that they did on this book. And we'll allow them to talk about it in a minute. And then Mr. Robeson has had many books. The first was Look Me in the Eye, which I have to say also is one of my favorite. And then his most recent book is on his experience with transmagnetic stimulation. And I was talking a little bit earlier with them about how I do think that John's most recent book kind of rolls into a little bit of what John and Karen talk about in their book. So I'll let Donovan, start. A little bit, just give us about 5 minutes of an overview of your book.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks very much, Sydney. And I'm so honored to be on the panel, not only with my colleague Karen, but with John Robeson.
Oh, funny. Oh, I love that.
And that's what happened.
That's great.
That's a little improv. Can you hear me now? Yeah? All right, thanks.
Could have heard you before, too.
I'm just
You don't
stay
need a
close
mic.
to this thing.
You don't need a mic.
That's good? I was complimenting my co-author Karen, and also talking about what an honor it is to be with John Robeson, who is not only a terrific writer, he's an original in the story of autism. He's somebody we actually refer to in our book because he's such an important player and game changer. He's a reconciler. He's a peacemaker in a community that's often at odds with itself. So we're gigantic fans of John's and friends as well. So it's a pleasure to be sharing the table with him this way. So Karen and I work together in television news at ABC News, and Karen is the producer. She's traditionally been behind the scenes, and I've been the person on television on camera. Karen, yeah.
John's used to me interrupting him when he speaks.
Yes,
or
very
talking into his ear.
Yeah. All of the smart things that have come out of my mouth have come from Karen's brain, essentially.
No, only sometimes.
And what strikes me in an event like this, and not only are we loving this festival and the weather, etc., but it's very exciting for me personally to actually see all of you here. It took us 7 years to write the book, which was far longer than we anticipated. And there were times when you're deep it's late at night and you're writing and you're wondering, will anybody ever care? Are we going to reach anybody? And the fact that I'm seeing all of you is incredibly gratifying to me, and it's much bigger thrill, and I'm not joking about this, to see you all here than any time I've ever done anything on television. Although the audience there can be millions, I don't get to see you looking back, and the fact that you came means a great deal to us. And the other surprising thing to me about you here, given what Karen and I did, which was look back at where the concept of autism came from, when it broke out into the public consciousness, when science and psychiatrists and families began dealing with it, paying attention to it, trying to respond to it. In that look back, we recognized that it was not that very long ago that if we had put the word autism on a poster advertising a talk, nobody would have known what we were talking about.
They would have thought artistic. They're artistic.
Yeah, we met many families who told us the story that when they told friends and families that they had an autistic son or daughter, they would be congratulated for having an artist in the family. And so that was not so long ago. And we wanted to set out to find out what is this backstory. Motivated by the fact that, as we said in our talk yesterday, Karen and I really wanted to change the world in a certain way. Karen has a son who's now 22 years old and lives in Phoenix for the time being, although she's from New Jersey, and he grew up in New Jersey, who has autism. And I have a brother-in-law who lives in Israel, who was born in 1967.
And my son is in Phoenix because there still is so little support for young adults and the right programs and the right jobs. So I had to.
Yeah, sure. And our goal was to create the situation such that the larger community, the people who don't know anything about autism, or don't think they do, or don't think they know anybody with autism, will realize that, number one, they probably do, and number two, that autism can come up in any family, any time, and number three, and most importantly, the way that the community as a whole responds to people who are on the spectrum has so much impact on the quality of life that a person on the spectrum can have. It determines where they can work, where they can live, whether they're welcomed, whether they have friends, whether they have support, whether the police arrest them or give them assistance in a dangerous situation. All of those things have to do with everybody else outside the autism world. The people, we refer to them sometimes as the civilians in our story. And we wrote a book that honors and celebrates people who have lived the autism story for 75 years, as individuals with the diagnosis, as their families, as their teachers, as their educators, as their activists and their supporters and the scientists working on it. We honor them, and we tell them you have this amazing, astounding, untold backstory, and it is amazing and astounding. We didn't have any idea how turbulent it was and filled with both heroes and villains, but that it also works as a real sort of stealth civil rights story. Not only do we want to tell people in that community, this is your story, be proud of it, be inspired by it for all of the work yet to be done because we've come so far, but we also wanted to get that message across to people outside the autism
Actually,
world.
that was our goal, was to reach people outside the community. Because for all of us that are part of the community, it's a great read and it's great stories, and it tells you how far we've come, yet we still have so far to go. But the people outside of the community are the people who really need to know more about autism.
And it scared me a little bit when Sydney told you that the book is filled with data. What I'd like to say is the book's data is sound, but that it actually is, it's more of a story. It's written more like, we hope, more like a novel. And it's about characters and people and families. And
it's true. But what I would say is that the science of it, when I'm reading it, a lot of times when I'm reading stories, I have to flinch a little bit. And that you had a wonderful story, starting with the story of the first boy who was diagnosed with autism by Leo Connor. So it's a wonderful story woven through, but I still like the science.
Well, we tell the story of the first person ever diagnosed with autism, and it's sort of a bookend to our story. And part of that is because it's such a happy story. And in many ways, autism has been challenging for families and for people on the spectrum. And people forget how far we've come. People forget that when, years ago, when a child was diagnosed with any kind of mental disability, the parents were told, put them away, put them in an institution, and literally forget you ever had them and take care of the rest of your family. And today we don't think about that. But that was what doctors told parents to do.
do people remember the name Dr. Spock?
Duh.
Okay, duh. Well, we've talked with some college students who give us total blank. Who's Dr. Star Trek, right? That's what I mean. It should be Mr. Spock. Dr. Spock in his 1947 edition, first edition he wrote, gave the recommendation that when it was called Special Circumstances, page 547, I believe, maybe 567. He wrote in 1947 that when a child was born, and it was evident at birth that the child had some sort of developmental disability, and he was referring mostly at that point to Down syndrome, but he said if you could tell in any way that the child had some sort of issue, that the child should be removed from the mother then and placed into institutional care. And in the second edition, a few years later, he said, by the way, experience shows you should have this conversation with the father because the mother will fight back. And that's how powerful the impulse was if somebody was different enough to put them away.
And I was furious when I heard all of this. I just thought, well, what parent would ever do that? But it's what all parents were doing because they were told to. And so in researching the history, I had more compassion for the families who had to bring up their children during that time period. Because after the institutionalization, the first thing parents tried to do was to break that down. And after they did that, then they had to try to get them into schools because, we also forget that children on the autistic spectrum were not allowed in schools. The law said you could just say, we don't want this kid. And we have, we wrote about a family in our book who went from school district to school district to school district, where they said, you're wasting our time. We heard about you already. Because they wanted a place for their child to be able to go to school.
And we interviewed a school superintendent retired in San Diego who was still laughing about the fact that back in 1972, the parents of a boy with an autism diagnosis severely, severely challenged, were always coming down asking for help. And one day, in frustration,
The help was education.
right. And one day they came, and which was denied. And one day they showed up on the front lawn of the school superintendent's building with handing out leaflets, and they had like little posters. And he jokingly told us, well, you know what I did is I went to the guy who ran the custodial. What's the word I'm looking for? No, it wasn't quite the janitor. The grounds guy, the guy who ran the grounds. Maintenance. Thank you. He said I had him turn on the lawn sprinklers, and he chuckled.
He thought it was funny.
And he told us that in 2007. He's passed
So
away
we've
now.
come so far, but we haven't come so far. And that's sort of.
What's so
the
bad about
point.
turning on the sprinklers?
It soaked the protesters and chased them away.
Oh, I didn't get that. Okay.
I should have completed the thought.
But
Dr.
that's-
Mr. Spock would have completed the thought.
All right already.
Yeah. So I think we should wrap up, but you were making the point that we've come a long way.
But we haven't gotten there yet, and we still have a long way to go. And the point of our book was to look at the past and remember the battles and how challenging it was for families and for people with autism, and to also know that we need to move forward because we're not there yet.
Especially when it comes to adults. And by that we mean a lot of families with young children are still facing real tough challenges, uphill battles. There's no question about that. But those families don't know how much worse it used to be, and how now they're standing on the shoulders of families in the 60s and the 70s, the 80s and the 90s who fought amazingly difficult battles and won. And so our book focuses for a good deal of its length on the battles fought by these parents. And then it switches in the 90s. The definition of autism expanded to include people who could speak for themselves, speak up for themselves, advocate for themselves. And the story kind of is taken over more in that sense, in terms of public conversation, by people who are on the spectrum, who can talk about themselves and advocate for
I mean,
themselves.
John educated the world about Asperger's syndrome. Really, he educated me when my son was first diagnosed. And there weren't, John is really the first generation of individuals who were able to tell us how challenging it was to grow up in our world. I have one question before I sort of pass this along, which is, how many people here know someone or are connected to someone with autism?
Would Asperger's
Yes.
syndrome be included?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So, we'd like to just sort of have a sense of the audience.
Anybody who's not connected in some way? Thanks.
Yes. And also, how many people in the audience are professionals and work with people with autism?
Holy crap.
Wow.
So to me, as a
The
parent,
majority.
you're the unsung heroes of my kid's life. So thank you.